Hey everybody, let's talk a little bit about your trends story that you have coming up. Now on Tuesday, you're going to be submitting your trend story pitches via Folio, and that evening I'm going to take a look at them and give you some feedback on them. But before we get to that point, I just want to give you a heads up of the two different directions you can take the inspiration for your pitches, for your ideas for this. Namely, what we're doing in this story is writing about an observable or a statistical change in action or behavior or idea. There's a lot of bad trend stories out there, and we're going to talk a lot next week about how to avoid them. But for now, let's think about this in terms of where we can get our ideas from. And there are really two places, I think, to start. One is localizing a national trend, and the other is observing a trend on your own. So what I mean by localizing a national trend is the idea of looking at stories that have popped up in the news, searching for ideas yourself, and looking at stories that talk about national trends. A lot of the times you can do this by looking at stories that mention the term millennials, because stories will be something like millennials buy fewer cars, millennials buy fewer houses. Millennials are more likely to move in with their parents after they graduate, stuff like that. And then you can interview specific people in this area and say, hey, here's the statistics at the national level on this. Do you think that this is a trend here as well? Are more people doing this or not doing this here in Statesboro or here in South Georgia? So one example I got just from searching is this, which I think is actually a pretty clever story. And it is, ask not for whom the doorbell tolls, they won't answer it. It's a trend story that looks at the fact that millennials are less likely to answer the door if someone knocks or there's a doorbell ring, which I think is kind of funny. It's based on some numbers. I'm not logged in now, so I can't scroll through the rest of the story. But this is a national story that you could take and turn local. And you could say, hey, look, well, in the Wall Street Journal, there was a story talking about how millennials don't answer the door. Here in Statesboro, do you ever answer the door? Or do you get nervous if someone rings on the doorbell? Do your friends let you know via text first if they're coming over, or do they ever come over unannounced? So you're taking a big national story and you're localizing it down to this specific area. The nice thing about that is we get built-in stats. You have not necessarily a source, because sources have to be human beings that you talk to, but you get a sort of built-in foundation. Now the other is observable trends. These are something that you can get simply by opening your eyes, looking at the world around you, and trying to see something that you see as a different action or idea than what things used to be. This can be something as simple as looking at a fashion trend. So I've seen really good stories written by students for the trend story about girls dyeing their hair silver, that sort of silvery gray color. A couple of years ago, I had one who wrote it about the trend of man buns. That was pretty funny. It was a pretty good story. But these can also be pretty serious, right? This can be stuff like, especially nowadays, it could be the use of study-enhancing drugs. So essentially the use of Adderall to study illicitly. One of the good ones is sort of what you're going to do after graduation. If someone's in steep credit card debt, so the use of credit cards by college students. These are simply trends that you can observe by looking around you and seeing if there's something you're noticing more of or noticing less of. So you don't end up getting statistics to deal with as much as you get usually really interesting interviews and interesting quotes and sources from people. So that's the two directions I'd like you to see you go for this. You can pitch a combination of these on Tuesday, or you can go all one way or all the other. But really, this is the two big points to make. You can either look for stories that are national and localize them down, or you can try to observe a trend on your own. And that could be anything from fashion to behavior to drug use to anything that we've talked about so far, or anything you come up with. Well, I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with on Tuesday. And I will see you all again next Thursday.